Mary's birth certificate states she was born in a taxicab on Cortlandt Street in Atlanta. I managed to find a photograph of the actual taxi she was not born in because the doctor who signed the birth certificate was joking. It was in a neighbor's car that Mary was born on the way to the hospital. But the point still is she couldn't wait to get started, and she hasn't slowed down since. Her parents from Florida and Missouri came together in Atlanta. Mary had an older brother whom she cleverly called brother, while she was Da because brother couldn't say daughter. The family wasn't wealthy, but every December was made special by a trip into the city for a holiday meal at an actual restaurant. Mary's legendary love of Christmas may have originated in this early excitement of the season. Mary's influence in Hollywood was felt when 1920s it girl Louise Brooks adopted Mary's hairstyle, and Mary, has been setting trends ever since. She was a star student and became a Scottie at 17, and romance was in the air when Gone with the Wind premiered in her hometown. Vivien Leigh was obviously picked for the lead because of her resemblance to this local bombshell. Look closely and you may spot Mary in the crowd, being escorted inside on the arm of Clark Gable. And speaking of romance, just a year later, Mary caught the eye of a young man from North Georgia who drove to Atlanta from Charlotte, where he was working every weekend for 5 months, culminating in September 1941, the couple here fleeing the wedding party to jump on that bicycle for their honeymoon. Of course, just 3 months and a day later came the day that still lives in infamy, and young Dan can be seen here in uniform, about to be shipped out. Mary moved back in with her parents and enlisted to do her bit on the home front, fighting to overcome the era's critical rubber shortage at Goodyear. 4 long years later, Mary and her sister-in-law left this plaintive chalk message in the basement of their in-laws' home in Gainesville, pleading for their beloved safe return. We must never forget the sacrifices made by Mary and Dan's generation. They would have been married for 80 years next month, and exactly 40 years ago, a poem described their post-war years. Out of the hills of North Georgia, down through Hall Valleys for work, young Dan descended, and soon he befriended and made his intended, the lovely young Miss Mary Kirk. In 41 they were wed, but the war reared its head, and Dan was sent across the sea. On return he was back at work, and soon there was Kirk, followed shortly thereafter by me. Moves followed to Louisiana, Decatur, Dublin, and Columbus as Dan moved up Ma Bell's ladder, and Mary became a center of each of these communities, but most of all, hands-on parent to one well-behaved star student and another child. Vacations from the routine totaled 2 in all those years, a trip to Louisiana in 58, the other to Chicago in 63 for a 3-game series at Wrigley. But Mary didn't let her boys call all the shots, dragging us from the ballpark to a performance of My Fair Lady, the tunes from which, I admit publicly for the first time, still resonate in my head. Busy as she was running the household with endless outings to ball games in every season, Mary didn't hesitate when St. Luke asked her temporarily to fill their youth director position while they searched for a trained professional. Of course, the church never made the slightest effort to do so. She made up for a lack of credentials by spreading the gospel according to Peanuts, finding in the stories of Charlie Brown, Linus, Lucy, and Snoopy life lessons that have served us well. When she accompanied Dan to Bell headquarters in Atlanta, church leaders may or may not have saluted her with this lovely pair of assets. The 1970s and 80s brought grandchildren, one after another, until they began to arrive 2 at a time. All 6 have looked forward to her visits, and especially to trips to Columbus, swimming at her friend Mary Lou's, celebrating Christmas no matter the time of year, or supervising the Sears Woods neighborhood with its mayor and first lady. Her 9 great-grandchildren are also carrying on her proud legacy. Mary and Dan missed Columbus during their decade away and hurried back when Dan left Ma Bell. Already president of 3 Rotary clubs and governor of 40, he was welcomed back as secretary for the Columbus Club, delegating much of the paperwork to Mary, who famously achieved near-perfect attendance by the personal notes she sent to every absent member, prompting them to make up lest they hear from her again. And when Dan left us, 4 days short of the millennium, Mary took title to the job she'd been doing for a decade, holding the position until her retirement at 98. Rotary also gave Mary and Dan a chance to see the world, representing the club at conventions in and touring England, France, Switzerland, Sweden, Italy, and New Zealand. And speaking of tours, Mary returned to St. Luke as tour guide extraordinaire, filling buses several times a year to places far and wide, many testifying that the destinations, fall leaves in New England or stage shows at Branson, were secondary to the good time guaranteed by any trip she arranged and supervised. The Mary Reed Garden on church grounds now recognizes this outreach beyond the home congregation. Her legendary status in Rotary culminated with the creation in 2007 of the Mary Reed Award, annually recognizing the member who best embodies the service above self ideal of the organization. Past recipients unanimously testified to the honor of the link to her name and legacy. The most recent earned special recognition for the computer maintenance he regularly does for Mary. The penultimate awardee also repaid Mary with a card that entitles her to free food for her lifetime at any of his area restaurants, an offer he may be beginning to regret. Even though she's used the privilege rarely, I did notice when she took me to the drive-thru for an ice cream on a recent visit, the whole staff came to the window to greet Miss Mary by name. Mary's birthday has become a major means by which Columbus marks the passage of time. Rotary celebrating the day by riding her into the club's meeting at the Trade Center on the back of a motorcycle, to the city's motorcycle police force leading a parade past Mary at her condo. In fact, I think the parade for her 99th only ended last Tuesday, just in time for us to be with her for today's festive, if still socially distanced, occasion. Once today's festivities end, I know we'll want to begin planning next year's celebration, hoping we can remove our masks and give Miss Mary the actual hugs to tell her what a gift she is in all our lives. Happy 100th, Mary!